Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Arden, and today we're talking about Miles Morales' Spider-Man number 19. So, it's been a while since I've read a book that's shocked me as much as this one. And it's going to be a very interesting review because the degree to which this book is surprising and a cool experience really depends on your level of familiarity with Miles Morales and his history in the comics. If you're like me and have read a huge swath of comics featuring Miles from his Ultimate Spider-Man days all the way into this run with Saladin Ahmed, which has been really awesome and has had a lot of cool moments to it. This book pays off in ways I truly did not see coming and absolutely enjoyed. If you haven't read this book, I will say here and now you should probably read it, but again, it kind of depends on how familiar you are with Spider-Man. It it gets beyond just me saying oh, you should read the whole series before you check out book number 19. It gets into, oh, you want to read a good chunk of Spider-Man content to understand things. I guess for people's sake, I will link to that Origins Bio video I did for Miles years ago. That will help in a couple of key ways. It's not just a self-promotion thing, because actually I do think that video is a little out of date. It kind of peters out. It doesn't peter out. It goes right up until what was present day for Miles Morales then, at a time before he had joined the main Marvel Prime Universe, and all of that other stuff has happened to him. So it's a little lacking, we'll say, just in terms of it only goes so far, but it should be enough if you watch that video and read this series. That'll work. That's enough. That you would at least appreciate this book for what it is. And I'm not saying that to be self-promoting. I actually didn't think of that until we started streaming, and the only reason I'm really saying that is because some viewers recently commented and said, this video was really helpful, thank you. So I guess it's still helpful, which is good to know. Karsten Logan, thanks for joining us. Always good to have you on board. Oh, I got quite a few people coming in here. I did have a very clickbaity title, but that wasn't advertised in this book. That's how I feel about this issue, and I think it holds up. This book is damn good and worth your time, and a really cool take on Miles Morales in a way I don't know, I didn't think of before. It goes beyond just that crazy little clone that we saw of last issue, but I don't want to give away the game yet. For those of you who don't want to be spoiled, I want to dance around that for as long as possible. I think we will talk about it because it is interesting. Jason Raza says hello. Thanks for joining us, Jason. Brandon Walton also says hello. Hi, Brandon. I'm doing pretty good today. Had an appointment in the morning, but it went pretty well, and I'm in the mood for a good stream. Issy says, "Oh, this is the clone issue, right? I was more interested in Ultimatum about time the Ultimate Universe came back." Well, that stuff's been dealt with so far in Miles Morales Spider-Man. So I had to very carefully read that comment to make sure we weren't going to spoil anything just yet. But what Izzy's talking about is pretty much stuff that's happened so far. Up until now, in this series with Saladin Ahmed writing for Miles Morales, and you have people like Carmen Carnero and Marcela Ferreira, who did the pencils of this issue. Carmen also did inks along with J.P. Mayer. David Curiel does the coloring, and Corey Petit does lettering. All pretty people who have pretty consistently worked on the series so far and have drawn a beautiful series, but Saladin's writing is so good, and he just knocks this character out of the park. It becomes very clear to me that he read every single book that ever dealt with Miles Morales and crafted his own story out of all of that. And in this particular volume of Miles, so the last 19 issues out of the 259 we've had this with this character so far, which I know because Marvel now helpfully does the legacy numbering, we know that Spider-Man was cloned by this very mysterious, extremely malevolent force called the Assessor, who did all these horrible experiments on the real Miles. And as we found out in the last couple of issues, while superheroes have been outlawed on the streets of New York City, Miles has been preoccupied by an apparent clone of himself using powers to attack people. Oh, Karsten, sorry to see you go, but thanks for having us. Um, Karsten also asked, how old do you think Miles Morales is? I think he would be like around 17. He recently had a birthday in this series, actually. Oh, Izzy says 18. That's helpful. Thank you. And it would be firmly established because of that birthday. So, yeah, there you go. He would have to still be a teenager because he's still in high school. Although you Americans, I think, stay in high school a little longer than us Canadians. Because, well, I'm not sure. I think that depends on the state. In Canada, assuming you go through education normally, you are done high school by 18 at the latest. I graduated at 17, not because I'm special, just because I have a late birthday. So I don't know if that's unusual or not for Americans, but Miles does seem to be on his way out of high school. I think he's in grade 11 or 12, right? I don't know. Anyhow, I think they like, oh, Izzy says, yeah, that, like the years for America seem about the same, but you call it college instead of university. That's fine. I'm just not used to it. Anyways, so there's this clone, and then there's also this mysterious figure right there on the screen right now called Ultimatum, who has been kind of menacing Miles and was traveling around with the ultimate version of Green Goblin. And Ultimatum seems like a weird combination of various Ultimate Universe outfits, like Giant Man and Captain America sort of cobbled together. He's been a real mystery until now. So, with all that in mind, I think we're going to start to slowly venture towards spoiler territory. If you care at all, I really do like this was a real shock. I don't often get shocked. I don't often care much about spoilers or plot twists. Stories have a certain structure, and once you kind of learn that structure, you can see plot twists. Like they're not that surprising usually. This one blew me away. We'll talk about the ramifications of it and like what I think of it, but I was really impressed by this book and give it a huge recommendation between its fun artwork and some of the creativity going in here. These artists, without getting into it too much, had to tread new ground in a very specific way in this issue, and they did a fantastic job. Okay, so we're going to leave spoiler-free land there. But we do open on pretty normal stuff. The kids of Miles's school and like all his friends are currently locked up by Cradle, who are doing so because they were protesting the law against superheroes, and Cradle's some sort of, or sorry, not superheroes, young superheroes, underage ones, and Cradle is the very oppressive organization that has sort of sprung up to do it. This actually addresses something we talked about in my review for the last issue too, where some of the stuff brought up here is kind of talking a little, like we talked a little bit about how the adult superheroes are kind of giving it the side eye, but that gets followed up on a little later in a way I really appreciate. So the B story of this book, which is very much the kids kind of dealing with being in like jail for the night, is that, well, it's like it's called an operation center, but whatever. They're held in like just like the drunk tank equivalent, basically, just for protesting. And their congresswoman is there protesting their arrests. But she doesn't seem to have a lot of sway about this, though she says she's made some calls of her own. So even though the A story is huge and has big ramifications for Spider-Man, the B story is very strong, and they don't really seem to be related in any way, but it's all very entertaining. And you do kind of want these things to be tied together, because all this clone stuff really doesn't seem to have anything to do with this whole outlawed business that purportedly these books are, I guess, supposed to tie into. Izzy says the Cradle storyline is a bit iffy to me. Like Kamala Laws basically says that any superhero under 21 is basically breaking the law, but isn't vigilantism already illegal? Yep. I guess the thing is they had a whole civil war about whether or not adult superheroes are illegal, and they decided to just sort of let adult superheroes be or work with them as best they can. But I think, and we talked about this for the last review, like there is an argument to be made that the same arguments don't really apply to underage heroes, and the adult superheroes might have to sort of accept that compromise. It's potentially an interesting thing. We've really only been reviewing it in the Spider-Man book, and thus far it's not super related to Spider-Man's life at the moment. But that could change. And I do like the idea, because the dynamic of the original Spider-Man is him kind of always being against the cops, and that was very revolutionary at the time when Stan Lee first envisioned Spider-Man. So for us to kind of return to that with Miles and other young superheroes, I'm not against. Even being like a long-term permanent thing, like they're always chased down hard by the cops, and you have to keep your identity secret if you're going to do this, like as a young superhero, or else there will be trouble, and trouble not on the same level as someone over 21. Izzy also says, how are they able to tell their ages? Most heroes wear a mask. LOL. Well, that's why they still need to wear a mask. Some of them are public, some of them are outed, some of them are obvious, and it really just comes from there. But like you said, because vigilantism is illegal, you can just, like an officer can attempt to arrest any young-looking superhero now, and they would have to produce identification, thus potentially revealing their identity. Because again, vigilantism isn't exactly allowed. I don't know if the world of Marvel and the American government has made special amends to that since the era of Civil War, but I don't think so. But I'm not defending that storyline too much. I haven't seen much of it, and I would have to look at other books and see how much they're exploring it, because like I said, Spider-Man doesn't care at all. So we then cut to Miles, who is imprisoned with his uncle, and the assessor shows off the Miles clone while talking in his usual creepy self, but this time we get to see who hired the assessor. And if you think the twist just ends here, because it is Ultimatum, you actually, that page is flipping by, that's where we see Ultimatum. He's revealed in front of Miles as the person who hired the assessor to do all those experiments. And he says he's been looking forward to meeting Spider-Man for a long time. Meanwhile, at Cradle, Captain America shows up, which is funny because we specifically talked in my review of issue number 18 about how it feels like Captain America probably wouldn't tolerate this. I think a viewer said that in chat, and I agreed that out of all the heroes, I don't think he would take it standing down, while others might kind of look the other way. And sure enough, the Congresswoman called him, and he says, oh, my representative called me, and she said she was having trouble here. And he pretty much demands that these kids get let free. Meanwhile, okay, and here it is. So, this is kind of your last stop if you want to avoid spoilers at all costs for those of you that are joining us. There's a big spoiler in this book that I think is worth reading, depending on how much you know about Spider-Man, or going back to the beginning of this review and kind of judging as we go into it. But, okay, here we go, because we got viewers coming in. So, and I always feel bad about that, but just spoilers ahead. So Ultimatum stands before Miles and says, you're trying to figure this all out, right? Like, what's been happening? And Miles is like, well, your ultimatum, I've been trying to track you down for months. And he's like, yeah, I know, but I wasn't ready for us to meet until tonight. Miles says, what have you done to the Prowler? And Ultimatum's like, okay, we both know that that's your Uncle Aaron. And, it's an interesting conversation, especially reading now and knowing the truth behind it, but it's well written. Because there's a little bit of comedy here, and Dent's like, oh crap, last time Miles was in custody of these guys, that was a brutal experience of him being tortured. They were experimenting on him and opening up his guts and fiddling around with him while he was conscious, and doing messed up stuff to him. So it's nice to have a little bit of humor diffuse this situation. And he's like, Ultimatum continues. He's like, I know all your secrets, like your uncle. I just talked to him, but his suit's booby trapped, so I guess he got knocked out or something. And he's like, but don't worry, your uncle will be fine if you cooperate. And then Miles is like, well, what do you want from me? And he's like, um, I'm about to close the gap. I want to deliver this how the book delivers it. And he starts talking about how he's been taking over the criminal underworld and like becoming the ringleader by taking out anyone with any like leadership potential, and just sort of slowly consuming the criminal network and just seizing power. And Miles is like, but you can't have that amount of power. And he's like, no, I've been growing green goblins with that drug that was around from like earlier in the series. Oh, okay. Brandon says there is a Daredevil story called Supreme that acts as precedent for heroes to not have to reveal their identity in criminal proceedings. Well, I hope Marvel knows about it and that they hold to it, because a court precedent would actually be a good thing, like in the world of understanding the legal logistics of superheroes. And in theory, that world should hold to that standard until a new law takes place or a higher court changes that ruling. And either overrules it or puts something else in place. Izzy says, thank you, Brandon, by the way. What's interesting is that Miles and Ultimatum have almost no. Okay, well, hold on. We're not quite there yet. Miles says, so are you, like, so he's like, what's the point of all of this? And he's like, he then says, okay, no more games. Like, your earliest memory is playing on Coney Island and skinning your knee. And Miles is like, how do you know that? And are you a telepath? And he takes off his mask and reveals, no, I'm the like one. What was the universe name? One of you guys said it earlier. 1610 version of Miles Morales. And he is well drawn as like an older version of the character, but like scarred and clearly like a criminal version. And now we have to take a pause. So first of all, I'll read your comment now, Izzy. And she said, or he says, Miles and Ultimatum have almost no similarities in appearance or age or origin, yet they share common memories. The multiverse is so cool. I agree. It makes sense that he would look different. It's a different universe. And I think it's better that he looks a little different. And that gets into what I was saying about the artist doing a great job designing this character. I like the scars instantly denoting this ain't our young and relatively innocent Miles. And, oh, Larfleeze, thanks for... hey, Larfleeze, hey, hell yeah, thanks for joining us. That's a fun username. So, yeah, I think that's all great. And yeah, no worries, Izzy. I just wanted to get to that part because it was literally on that page. And he says, like, oh, the memories are coming back. And all of a sudden, everything Miles kind of pseudo remembers about the Ultimate Universe. Oh, wait, no. Miles is 1610. The other Ultimatum is the 616 version of Miles. I got them backwards, which is a huge oversight on my part, but it's because Marvel has kind of stepped away from the 616 version. So, oh yeah, I wanted to take a pause here. A long time ago, Brian Michael Bendis wrote the first crossover series between Peter Parker and Miles Morales called Spider-Man. And that story was significant for a few reasons. Phantasm says, are you going to archive this? Oh yeah, don't worry, we archive all the streams. I haven't not done that with any of them unless, like, there was some with the D&D thing we attempted that got horribly claimed on copyright, so I never bothered to put them back online because they were interrupted. But yeah, no, well, we'll definitely archive this. Don't worry about that. This one's going to be important. It's got like a news thing. So anyways, Spider-Man was kind of funny because when they first did the Ultimate Universe, they said, oh, well, when we get really desperate for ideas, we'll cross over between the Ultimate Universe and the Prime Universe in 616. I think Bendis himself joked about that. Now, he was kind of more talking about the Peter Parker Ultimate version crossing over with the 616 version. That would have been pretty pointless. But eventually Miles Morales came around, and the idea of him meeting the 616 version of Peter Parker kind of made sense. So they had a fun little adventure together, and at the end of that adventure, Peter Parker decided to look up Miles Morales in the 616 universe to see what he could find out about the guy. And what he found kind of shocked him, but we never really found out. Yeah, go ahead, Izzy. No big deal, because we're getting into spoilers now. It's all good. You want to ask something about what happened in Spider-Man 2, which, to be fair, I don't remember super well. So if you have something to add for that, that would be great. But anyway, so he looks up Miles Morales in 616 and was surprised by what he saw. And that was always just kind of a dangling plot thread. And that was Bendis. So I don't know if Bendis, like, left this a note or something. And I think at some point maybe we did learn that the 616 version of Miles was some sort of criminal. Izzy says that they're confused, and maybe this gets into what I just said. Last we saw Ultimatum before this comic series was in Spider-Man 2. The older Spider-Man ended up traveling to the 1610 universe and even met his dead, now alive wife. So how is he here? Oh, okay. I don't remember that. And I'm pretty sure I read that story. So there is something like that, but I don't really remember where Spider-Man 2 places in terms of all this timeline stuff. Because the way I interpret it is that was some sort of... Oh, I see. I don't know. I don't know how that fits exactly. Maybe they're going to explain it, to be honest. Because that's a good question, and I don't really know it. Because otherwise it fits perfectly with like Peter's reaction and this much more like criminal Miles Morales now harassing Spider-Man. And maybe that was revealed before, but I just found it so fun to have that all cross over here and Miles' memories like come flooding back and stuff like that. And if this was done before and Saladin Ahmed's just kind of pulling back, oh okay. The Might of Gabura, I think, answering Izzy, says 1610 was reset after Secret Wars 3. That was kind of my instinct, but I wasn't sure either. If that's the case, then that would make the most sense. Izzy says, it was in the last issue, it confirmed through his eyes, the Ultimate Universe is coming back. It happened like 3 or 4 years ago, so I don't blame you for not remembering. Oh, so it did happen after Secret Wars then. Okay, well, yeah. I mean, the fact that I remembered Spider-Man so well and appreciated that moment is something, right? Anyways, whatever the case, it's a cool-ass moment. And now we have a full appreciation for why Ultimatum is so interested in Miles, and he's so, like, ticked at him for no apparent reason. And sure enough, his parents show up looking for him, and they try, they fight their way into the facility and attack, and then Aaron suddenly gets up and is free from his chair, and he is approaching the younger Miles and says, get ready, and they're clearly about to act. Meanwhile, yeah, like Captain America's still he's got some great dialogue talking about like how it's important to fight against injustices, and he's encouraging to these kids he just helped free. Again, it's just a fun little moment. I'll talk about what you guys are saying in chat in a minute, because you got some interesting things, so that's going to be a whole discussion. Meanwhile, Aaron throws one of his little device things, and it blows up under Ultimatum's feet. Him and Miles begin to escape, and they have a nice little moment where they declare their love for each other. Oh, and I do have to pause right here, just for a hot second. My heart sank to the pit of my stomach when I read this scene. Because something about it just made me think, like, this is all great, but there's some tragedy up ahead of us. I don't know, it just felt like that could very well be the last little bit of dialogue between Miles and Aaron. And that's just what I thought reading this the first time as I was going through. So, Aaron and, Miles, I almost said Ultimatum, start battling Ultimatum's forces, including clones of Miles, just messed up, and they're all like gooey and weird when they get punched. It's a fun little fight scene. It's not like graphic, it's just creepy. And eventually they jump out of a window and make an escape, but they find themselves surrounded by ultimate green goblins. And the next issue is supposedly the Night of the Goblinoids. So, a strong issue overall that I think really kind of ties together with things dealing with Miles Morales. Apparently, some of this was set up in Spider-Man number 2, but either way, Ahmed does a great job at like taking Bendis's content and kind of running with it. And I already like Bendis, um, like revisiting some of the or no, sorry. I already like Ahmed's take on Miles Morales, just in terms of how he writes the character's dialogue and does that sort of thing, better than Bendis, is what I was trying to say. Uh, Bendis obviously created the character and deserves a lot of credit for that, but I think Ahmed is able to write the character a little more authentically and has a better sense of writing that family. And this series so far has been so strong, and this has been one of my favorite books yet, just because it pays off some stuff that, at the very least, I feel like has been dealt with pretty well. Um, Adrian Benningfield, thanks for joining us. And then you said something interesting that I wanted to hold off on until I finished kind of recapping the book. That you hope they don't bring back the Ultimate Universe. I think it's fine because, as far as I'm concerned, it very much is back, but just as a place that our characters can visit. I thought that's where Venom Beyond was going at one point, because it looked for a second like were visiting the Ultimate Universe, and the Maker was using the Ultimate Venom symbiote briefly at the beginning of that story. Doesn't seem like that's the case. Or no, it's definitely not the case in terms of the universe they're visiting, but it does seem like it's possible that that world can be visited. And you know what? The way the multiverse works is even if the Ultimate Universe doesn't come back, there's a million alternate versions of the Ultimate Universe that exist out there. What I think, and where I agree with you in particular, Adrian, is I don't necessarily need a line of Ultimate Comics again. Someone was saying they would rather Miles go back to the Ultimate Universe. I am dead set against that. I say extract characters like Miles and I guess Logan's son and anyone else of uniqueness and of interest from the Ultimate Universe and let it be that. But if they want to do a mini-series like revisiting the Ultimate Peter Parker, that would be fun. It'd be cool to kind of come back to his character after all these years. I have a lot of love and history with that particular character, so that would be great. But we don't need to have a whole new series with him again, especially because Bendis isn't around with Miles, or to write Miles or Peter anymore, or Marvel. Sorry, that's the word I was trying to say. And although that might be a good thing, and maybe someone else would be fun to take on the ultimate Peter Parker, but who knows? That was the case with Saladin and Ahmed and the Miles Morales. I think he was a definite solid improvement over Brian Michael Bendis for sure. Uh, Sorry, I'm just trying to find my place in chat. The Maida Gabura says, while original 616 miles while original 1610 miles carried on to the new 616, the 616 miles fights 616 Peter, and eventually the 616 miles gets pulled into the 1610 universe. Okay, so this was introduced. I really thought it was all new here, and I apologize for, I guess, oh, well, I now feel really bad for the title and thumbnail being a little misleading, but it's still a huge revelation for Miles to meet this character, for us to learn he's still around and has been doing all these plans and working against Miles all this time. I really didn't clue into that, even though I definitely read Spider-Man 2. We might have even... I don't think we reviewed it for this channel, but I think I was like read it and thought about doing it, and I was just like, I don't care enough, or something. Like Izzy said, it was a few years ago, and hopefully you don't fault me for not exactly remembering all of this. There's like 260 of these books out there. It's a lot. Izzy says, I hope Miles remembers what world he comes from. I started reading comics when around 2012 to 2013. I start with Miles. I don't want him to go back, but I did love his adventures there. You know, I think this book establishes he remembers now. He says he does. Ultimatum says, oh, the memories just came flooding back, didn't they? And Miles doesn't really deny it. I would like that too because it creates special significance around the character. It will give extra context to like why he freaked out when he encountered Venom in the Venom series, which was a cool little detail. And he couldn't quite remember. Those memories will be very interesting for him because he'll know certain things about villains that aren't necessarily true in this universe, but they present extra danger. He'll remember having like watched 1610 Peter Parker die, which is incredible. Just to think about the potential consequences of that, what he thinks about these goblins. He's surrounded by thousands, or like not thousands, but hundreds of them. Oh, and as you were saying, next issue will be great. I agree. It even shows that Captain America is going to join the fray, which is pretty cool. Izzy says, imagine how Miles would feel remembering his uncle dying, his mother dying, Peter dying, his father disowning him. That would be insane. Yeah, all of that stuff. I forgot about what went down around Cataclysm too, with his father that Izzy's referring to there. That's a hell of a moment. Yeah, they didn't exactly accept Miles so well the first time around. Well, Miles' dad, I should say. You said, Izzy, next issue is going to be insane. Oh, Adrian also said, it's neat to have multiple universes, but it can be wearing to see the same characters over and over again. Just think there are 260 in each of the billion plus different universes. I don't know what you mean by that, but I agree. It's important not to underestimate infinity. Infinity means, okay, people often fail to wrap their heads around this part. If I were to invite infinity divided by 2 equals infinity. You can look that up. You can read all about it online, but you got to think about it. Because a number that never ends, no matter how much you divide by any number, infinity divided by 10 billion is infinity. Now, infinity to the power of 0 is 1. You can multiply and do weird trickery like that, but you can't cut away at infinity. So that means there's an infinite number of worlds with Miles Morales in there. There's an infinite number of worlds without. There's an infinite number of worlds where he's a villain. There's an infinite number of worlds without. Writers of both Marvel and DC often underestimate the size and scale of the multiverse. And that's actually why stories like The Crisis of Infinite Earths or the 2015 Secret Wars bother me ever so slightly. Because you can't destroy infinity like that. You could have incursions happen to the end of time and it wouldn't matter. Not in the grand scheme of things. I always just sort of take those sort of stories with little asterisks in my own personal headcanon just to make it make sense in my brain. But that's a whole other, we could do a whole science of video about that, and I should one day, so maybe I'll just leave it at that. But I kind of agree with what you're saying there, Adrian. It's an interesting idea, but having 52 worlds as a set number or something doesn't work for me, and that actually goes against the grain of the theory and the idea. And some people don't like it, that particular take on it, because it means that your actions have no consequences, almost Rick and Morty style. I disagree. We know certain identities and certain characters from certain universes, and that matters to us. And this book's a perfect example of that. Think about the Mighty Gabura's little speech back and forth about different universe numbers and how he is able to keep track of that in a way that even I can't. And I say that just even I can't, just because I read a lot of these books and I still can't keep it all together. And I'm relatively good at these things compared to what I experience from the average comic book reader. So these identities matter and these stakes still matter, but you still have a world of potential out there where any mini-series of any kind can happen, and that's the way to do things. That's the way that any sort of adventure can happen, and the limit really, truly is only on the writers and the artist's imagination, the way it should be. And I believe that's the way DC is heading post death metal. I believe that's the world in Marvel post Secret Wars, and I think Alan Hickman very specifically understood that. Even though he did the incursion thing, you gotta accept things the way they are. And to be fair, that gets into the scale and intensity of the Beyonders' powers, and I am willing to let it go because, like in a story like Secret Wars and Time Runs Out, there's a million things you gotta accept, like crazy magic gods happening and stuff. And so, at a certain point, I get it. But I like these stories best when we're just embracing the multiverse for what it should be, which is the absolute abyss of infinity. Yeah, stakes don't matter, because in that theory, in that multiverse, you don't matter at all. And I don't mean you specifically any more than me or this entire planet. But I take some comfort in that because it means that our actions and what we do on this world are the meaning we ascribe to it. And there's no rules or system out there telling us what meaning we should take away from life and what's important to us. So I know we're getting to real big philosophy stuff, but that's the multiverse for you. And we're talking about metaphysics when we talk about the multiverse. And we're talking about a real theory in physics, even if it's more of something of science fiction than something that, a theoretical physicist is going to seriously talk about. That idea comes from like some random guy wrote like 100 years ago. I think like even Einstein like alluded to that, but it's more from a different person's theory, I believe, that like science fiction writers just sort of ran with, and they should have. That's what science fiction's for. Okay. Well, where are we in chat? Izzy was saying, yeah, Miles' father was super against enhanced beings and not only blamed his own son for Rio's death, but completely abandoned him. I didn't really talk about it when we were talking about that earlier, but I think that Rio's death was the deciding factor, as well as just the chaos under which Miles' dad discovered his identity in the Ultimate Universe. And then you were saying, if I remember correctly, Miles was only 15 or 16 at the time. Yes, it was a very, very traumatic moment for him. But the world was like being shattered around him at the time, so it felt appropriate. I remember reading those books, and they were something. Even if, like, warts and all, I do have a lot of affection for the Ultimate Universe, especially in the world of Spider-Man. Both the ultimate version of Peter Parker and the introduction of Miles Morales to the world in general. Izzy says that just makes the moment even worse, abandoning his kid in the middle of all of that. Oh yeah, it was a horrible thing for his dad to do, but I do understand his dad's emotional state at the time. He was kind of in shock, more like as much as anything else, and then he just turned angry. But that world was like falling apart around all of this, and I think that's how I sort of contextualize the story, and everything just sort of was ending for Miles' life at that point. He lost everyone, and the world was falling apart, which just kept happening in the Ultimate Universe. Like, people just kept dying. America wasn't America for a while there, and then the Earth collapsed. And Molecule Man really liked the burger that Miles managed to shelter from the Ultimate Universe enough that he kind of remade Miles' life in the 616 universe. And now we're dealing with the consequences of that, which is a cool thing for Saladin Ahmed to do. Like, that's a guy who did his homework. Because you really need to have a handle on a lot of content from different writers over the years to fully appreciate that and pay it off in this way without having to get into all the weeds of the stuff we just talked about. Saladin Ahmed manages to evoke this stuff throughout his book and this series so far in a really fun way where there's consequences to all of that. But we still get to have a fresh start for Miles. But is he going to remember all that stuff that Izzy was saying from earlier? I don't know. It's a good question. Izzy says, and remember that Miles' dad is not only a criminal, but somehow an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Things were getting crazy. Yeah, I don't know if did they get rid of all of that for the new universe, but there was a lot to him. And we haven't talked about his name being Jefferson Davis, which is a huge can of worms that Saladin Ahmed very publicly said he was going to deal with at some point. I don't know if that's happened yet in the series, and I've missed that, but I am curious about what he has to say about all of that. It's come up in little ways so far, but I think I don't know, he hates it, as does virtually every human being of color I've ever talked about on the issue. Um, you don't usually get consensus like that without people being really upset, and I think Bendis did a good job writing Miles overall. That's a blunder when you have that many people upset about something. Like, because keep in mind, Ahmed's not black. Uh, he's like Arabic, and he's still upset about it. So if you listen to why they're upset and their argument for it, which is compelling, I don't know why Bendis chose to do that. It feels like a weird accident, and I have a feeling it's one of those moments of ignorance where he did it and just was like, oh, I don't know, I wanted to name him after Thomas Jefferson or something. And I wanted him to have like a biracial family where he actually had his mother's name or something. And nobody at Marvel vetted that name. Brandon says, wait, what happened with Jefferson Davis? He's not exactly a well-regarded figure in American history. You can look this stuff up. I don't want to get into that, just because I don't know if I can speak to it with authority. That's the sort of thing I would like to research myself before I put together into a video. I can say that it like upsets people because that's something I personally experienced just talking to people about it, and like ask a person of color what they like, why like that, because that's a very public thing on Twitter. You can look up even and see that like, there's a lot of people who explain their feelings on it, and the words Jefferson Davis should get you pretty far. Izzy says, I completely forgot about Molecule Man and his love for Miles's burger. That was a fun moment, and that's why I brought it up, because it's just a very memorable part of Secret Wars. In a story of memorable moments, that little burger moment stood out. But that's because Alan Hickman's a cool writer. Adrian says, it's more about having multiple comic books about the same character. I don't mind the possibilities at all, just the physical comics to have to choose to buy. I think less is better in the case of how much I get one character. And you know what? That's fair. 45 minutes into this review, we're getting to our first bit of real criticism for this book, but I have one with like kind of piggybacking on what Adrian's saying. This book pays off, and I kind of said this at the beginning of the review, like, I loved this book, and I really got something out of this because I'm kind of like a fan of Miles and his history. But in terms of like having to buy books, like, well, it pays off to have read a lot of those older Ultimate Universe like Miles Morales books, pretty much all of them. It pays to have read off both of the Spider-Man crossover events. It pays off to have read the Secret Wars tie-in, or it's not tie-in, Secret Wars core story and the Time Runs Out storyline that leads up to it. And at the end of the day, where all these things pay off, you have to pay a lot of money in to like get to this point and appreciate all these stories, because I didn't even mention the 18 books that come before this one. That's expensive as hell, and is it worth that price? Well, not if you pay like cover price for each individual issue. I have gotten Secret Wars 2015 for free. I have managed to pick up various like Miles books for very cheap, like in dollar bins and stuff like that, or as part of larger sets where you get them for a really good price. Although I don't have that much of a collection anymore because I'm kind of fluid with these books, and a lot have departed in my from my possession over the years. But a lot of them I also have gotten on the digital market on sales and stuff like that, including like the first 2 volumes of this series for a very good price. I think I paid like a few bucks for each or something like that because they were on sale. And I was very happy with that. That was well worth the price of admission. So you can kind of see how these things are relative. But Adrian has a great point there, and it's hard to sell people on books where it's like, well, you can pay $4 for this and you probably won't understand an effing word of it. Well, maybe I'll understand like the basics of it, but the specifics of these revelations, no, good luck. You like I said, maybe if you read that, or sorry, if you watch that Miles video that I was talking about earlier, that would help. And you kind of read this series on top of that, then you'll get it. But that's a lot of homework to tell to a new reader or viewer, right? So that is a downside. The upside is for people familiar with this stuff, it's an energetic time to pick up this book. And even a relatively casual fan of Miles Morales, who's only read like some of the comics, would probably appreciate this thing, assuming they read Spider-Man at least. Because if you could pay off that moment of Spider-Man, like Peter looking up Miles and then realizing, oh, that original version that Peter saw is still here, and Peter was shocked because he's a horrible asshole. That's something. That's like interesting, and it'll be cool to see how that goes from here. Brandon Walton says, "Oh, now I know what you mean in regards to my earlier talk about Jefferson Davis. Yeah, it's messed up. I don't know why Bendis. Well, I went why I think it gives Bendis a lot of benefit of the doubt, but I think he deserves a lot of that benefit of the doubt because everything about Miles is so open, and it's cool to have a biracial character, and he did that. So why put a racist reference in the name of that character's father unless you're just like white as can be like Bendis is? Like I wouldn't have known that, but that's why in theory you have editors and like people working at Marvel to look these things up and be like, excuse me, people might be a little upset about this name. Can you change one of the two, like Jefferson or Davis, and no one will care. Call him Alan Davis and it never would have been a thing. And that would have been that. Oh well. Issy says, I think they retconned him being an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., but I think he was still a criminal, or at least first along with his brother, or at least at first along with his brother. He hates his last name because his name was notorious for negative situations. He was a real bad dude when he was young in the Ultimate Universe. Yeah, I guess that's something. I don't know. I think it was just something fumbled, and I'm not sure if Ahmed's done maybe dealing with that. It's kind of interesting that like there's a way to write that, and Ahmed's kind of danced around it a little bit, where like a person of color was saddled with that name, and what would that do to a person? And I'm not saying that as like from a writer's perspective, but from a character perspective, that could be written in an interesting way. And if you let more people of color write Miles, they can sort of handle that. And white writers shouldn't be afraid of creating like characters of color or vice versa. Like, but you need to be aware of these sort of things, and it's all the more reason to have a diverse crew working behind the scenes that can catch these things so it doesn't happen by the time it gets published and people start calling it out months after the fact. That's where like the argument for diversity is pretty strong, and I get why people like argue for merits and stuff, but I would argue what's happens, like if it was merit, then you wouldn't have the writers of Marvel and DC being overwhelmingly one color and gender. At the end of the day, the comic book industry is anything but merit, and it's always about who you know. Why do you think Brian Michael Bendis writes so many books for Marvel and DC over the years? Because he has connections. And at the end of the day, Saladin Ahmed, up until recently, did not. So, we went everywhere for this book, but for this video, I should say. Well, and this book, but it was doing some really interesting things, and it gets into everything from philosophy to politics, and not everyone's gonna like that, but hey, I got a lot of likes on the streaming thing, so I'm gonna take it that at least most of you were with me, and it was fun to chat about some of these things. I was very honest in this issue, so that's always great. Izzy says, yeah, I had my aunt pay for comics when I was younger. Oh, you're lucky. I never got my parents to do that for me. They were always willing to buy me books, but they were a little iffy on these things. Like, novels, I should say. These kind of books. Your usual business. This is Dark Tower, if those of you are wondering what I'm flashing. I should say it's The Gunslinger, the first book, which I'm currently working through. Izzy says, that's when I started reading comics online, like this one site for free. We don't usually talk about that on stream for legal reasons, but to be fair, you could be talking about Comixology Unlimited, which has lots of books for free. There's lots of ways to budget them if money's an issue. I would say Comixology Unlimited is the best deal because you can also get discounted books like this one. Instead of $3.99, it would be $2.84 or something on Comixology because I'm a member. Why do I buy the print version? Because I desperately don't want my local comic book store to go out of business. And there's something wonderful about having print. I usually try and do our reviews in print while digital just sort of fills the gaps. So I use it less, even though it would save me a lot of money. But that's the way of the world. But hey, I can afford to do so. Izzy, if you can't, then that's one option for you. Or if it's not, then, it is what it is. We all do what we can. You can spread the word about this book. You can retweet, promotional stuff from Marvel or these writers and artists. You can share this video to encourage people to buy the book itself. There's ways you can contribute to, pay back your enjoyment of these books without necessarily having to pay for it. At least that's always been my policy. So I guess now we've covered that in this stream too. This is like the only comic book video you'll ever have to watch. Brandon Walton says, I honestly didn't realize that today. I assume we're still talking about the Davis thing. Yeah, I'm willing to admit that I didn't know about it until people like Saladin Ahmed were talking about it on Twitter. And I'd heard about it before from other people of color in the world of comics, like reviewers and peers I have in the industry and stuff like that. I don't know these things off the top of my head, especially because it's American history that they're referring to. I only know so much about American history relative to Canadian. So that's why I was saying, if I were to write Miles Morales, I would love to have some sort of BIPOC editor or someone involved in the process to look over my shoulder and help out with that. I think otherwise I definitely could write for Miles in a fun way. Not that I aspire to or anything like that. I'm just saying so because you know why. This why. Adrian says, I don't think white people should be creating characters of different ethnicity, but to help give a perspective, they should ask someone from the background. I think you missed a pronoun there, because it seems like from the context you're saying they should be able to, as long as they ask someone from this background. The only thing I would say about that, because I've heard about this from people who are of color, of many different ethnicities, it's not on their burden, and unless you're compensating them financially or are prepared to explain their culture to you and to educate yourself about them. You want to know an easy way to do it? And you can talk to people about this in a friendly way, but a good way to inform yourself, and this isn't read a book. This is a book about GE. I'm just picking out a random one from my pile, but any ethnicity or racial group or sexuality group you want to write about, there will be books on them and what their life experience is like. And then you're not taking from somebody. If anything, you're benefiting an author who could probably use it. And I think that's the better way to do it. For example, I have a great example actually. When he was going about creating the Watchmen series for HBO, Damon Lindelof read an article by Ta-Nehisi Coates. that and Coates actually wrote a small insert here dedicated to Chadwick Boseman, and there's even a little tribute to him on the back of this particular book. I don't know if it's in this one, but it's in a ton of Marvel ones in general. And he talked. Oh shoot! I just completely lost where I was going because I got flashed into chat for a second. Um, well, it's all gone. uh, but yeah, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so like you can learn from books and you can talk to people. Oh yeah, so David Lindelof read this very interesting article about like Tulsa by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I distracted myself because I started talking about Coates. And he used that basically as a springboard for the entire Watchmen series. And I think, like, kind of just listening is all you really need to do. I'm not against having a conversation. That's just my own plug because sometimes it's easy to forget that people have time and they also have to explain this a lot to people. And a lot of people ask them of this, especially if they are surrounded by like white peers or something like that. It's a point of frustration I've heard from, you know, people in the community along those lines. That's just my word of caution, but otherwise I agree with you, Adrian. And Adrian then says, well, and then what threw me off is he said, well, yeah, people should be paid for their time. It seems obvious to you, and like the way you're putting it, yes, I agree, that's obvious. But it's very easy to just send someone an email asking some questions and they feel obligated to write out a relatively long answer. You should be more prepared to acknowledge their time and not just drain it from them because that's part of the problem that they face in their day-to-day life is having to explain this stuff. I can say that. I'll speak to that. And that's funny just because I'm obviously very white and obviously I don't suffer from that discrimination. But when your holidays come up and your holidays are different from everyone else in class, it's one thing for your mom to come in when you're in kindergarten and explain Hanukkah to everybody and cook latkes for the class and do it. It's another thing when you get those same questions 13 years in a row throughout all of your education. Like and being surrounded by the goyim in public school and high school, that my accent. Sorry, it just there is a Coates article in here. Sorry, something old just came out from under me and my voice for a second there because I was talking about it. And it's still kind of there. But anyways, it can be exhausting. So I relate to that to a degree. But like I always am very careful to bring that stuff up because there's a lot of Jewish people out there who will claim it's the same as being a black person, and no, I'm not confusing the two. Aspects of it are the same, and you can relate to certain aspects of it, like the example I just gave, but I don't get pulled over like I've been pulled over by the police once in my life, and it's because I was speeding. And it was a very polite encounter. Like, it's not the same. It will never be the same. Not in this world. It was once, maybe, but not in the world I grew up or live in now. And okay, we don't have to get into any more than that. Kenneth Robinson says, "Damn, I'm sorry I'm late." To this one, been wondering if you thought this story had big implications. Well, we're an hour in and talking about racism after having gotten into philosophy, the comic book industry, and all of this other stuff. So, yeah, I would say it would have implications. But thanks for joining us, Kenneth. I definitely liked this book. I think it really just has a lot of potential to change the direction of Miles's character in big ways because who knows what Ultimatum's going to do, but those memories are there now, and it's just kind of cool to see like it all the cards are out on the table now. Miles knows that there's a 616 version of him that like is a violent criminal, as Peter was shocked to find out at the end of Spider-Man, and I think that's pretty awesome. So definitely recommend. Oh, and sorry because I just hit a spoiler hard there, but you were asking about implications, so I assume you know. Kate Garrick, thanks for joining us. Tevia, thanks for joining us as well. Honestly, this whole meeting between Miles Morales and 616 is really interesting. And then he adds, I am Jewish and I understand. Oh, hey, that's cool. I didn't know that about you. I talk about it sometimes on stream when it comes up and feels appropriate. It did here. Kenneth says, damn, I'm really mad now that I'm late. It sounds like it's a pretty introspective stream. Well, don't worry, it will always get republished. Someone was asking about that earlier, so maybe I'll walk you through how YouTube currently works with that. So how it works is the stream ends and it becomes unlisted, and then it needs to process. It seems to me the way YouTube currently works, any video under 20 minutes gets processed almost instantly. It's ready to be fully monetized. It's not going to be like pulled or anything like that by their robots, and it's like the HD version is ready to go. Anything over 20 minutes takes about like 8 hours to process, no matter how long it is. So it usually goes up the next day. Same thing, but it will come up eventually. But we pretty much will always rebroadcast them. I had thought about like maybe doing a different live stream channel, but I don't think that's necessary. I think this is a way for us to kind of stay active and talking about things as changes happen in the comic book industry in a way that at no point in this history in the channel was Joey and I able to achieve. We were both too busy for that, but editing a video for every little bit of news that happens in the world of comics, by the time we finished editing a video, there would be developments and corrections that would need to be made. Doing things live, you guys can correct me as we go. I can be asked about questions and developments like as we stream, so we get to kind of stay in touch with that. And if I ever am like low on comics to talk about, there's always news and movie bits to talk about, which is definitely where I see a lot of our more news-oriented videos being created as from now on, like these live streams, so that I don't have to edit any of that sort of thing. And instead I can focus on editing top 10s. We're doing that grading the Avengers series, which I hope people like. It's kind of a personal project of mine. And other like bigger projects. I feel bad, but after my next top 10 video, like I'm gonna start working on complete stories again, because that's like the bigger goal. I just had some other stuff I wanted to do, but yeah. What was I gonna say? Complete stories for sure. Like that, I got some big ideas for ones, and I think like the way I can do a complete story now is just kind of do it fresh instead of like in the bits and pieces like we were experimenting on, or depending on the story, maybe we will do those issue by issue. It kind of depends on what kind of story it is. I like kind of doing it in little pieces because it takes me a long time no matter what, but this way you guys get to see it as it comes out. But YouTube doesn't love that as much these days, and it seems like our channel keeps getting penalized for it. So I'm experimenting around and finding out what's best. I also have just stopped caring about YouTube's algorithm. Like, I can't control that anymore. So I'm just kind of making content that I like and works for me these days, along with Joey, who I apologize for being, well, I don't apologize. He's sorry for being absent. We're still in touch. He's fine. He's just very busy and is in a really crummy situation because of COVID. So his videos are effectively just on pause right now. And for my part, I haven't really been working on any collaboration stuff because that's a way that he can show up on videos still, where I kind of do more of the work. So I personally need to work on that some more. I have a script that I need to send him. Like, that's our next step. We have stuff ready to go. I just haven't gotten around to it in a little while now, and I really, really should. So, on that note, maybe I should go work on that. So thanks so much, guys, for a really fun and interesting stream. I didn't really intend on that going into it, but like Kenna said, it was a really interesting stream. Oh, I should say, Kenna says, this channel is perfect. You'll get the recognition you should be receiving. Thank you for the friendly atmosphere. And, you know, a lot of it comes down to us just having to do more things like that. I think back in the old days, we did more work with Comicstorian. and kind of made ourselves more known in that community. And we kind of have an open invitation to go back to them or have them on here. And I haven't had the time. COVID hasn't been super easy for me either. So I think doing more stuff like that will help. But I'm not, worried. Uh, we're happy. I'm happy the way things are these days because, like, you guys, Kenneth was saying, like, it's casual and fun. Kay Garrick says he likes the live format. It's like talking, listening to you at a comic shop. And that was always kind of like, I remember from my earliest correspondence with Joey and kind of joining this channel, our goal was always to create more of a hangout and a community to talk about these things. And the comment section only does so much. That has been a very fulfilling part of live stream. Without maybe getting into the context too much, I was actually talking about streaming with someone today and saying I was really enjoying it. And it seems like, broadly speaking, you guys enjoy it too. I think the key thing to communicate about these streams was like, no, complete stories aren't going away or any other content. I do need to better integrate them. I think I made the mistake of kind of trading off like with top tens and origins and bios while there's a real demand for complete stories. I think part of my frustration with that is that I was still making complete stories and people were asking about them while they were coming out, which I found really bizarre. So that's why I kind of slowed down a little bit on them. But now that we are doing streams, and especially these books where we're kind of reviewing stuff, and I'm free to kind of do complete stories of whatever I want now, right? Because, well, I mean, there's some that I have agreed to do as part of Patreon requests still, but other than that, and like existing viewers' requests, the sky's the limit. So that is nice. Leaves a lot of potential for, what might come next or what I have planned, but I'm not giving away that game now. um, okay. Well, everything else everyone says is really supportive and nice, but I'm not going to just keep reading nice comments. Or, well, you know what I mean. Like, just I'll just say thank you guys. I agree with you, Kenneth. COVID is the ultimate supervillain. Tevius says, any opinion on Blood of Zeus Netflix show? Because I did do a review of this show. I haven't even heard of that, so I guess if you guys want to hear about thoughts on that show, you can check out Tevia's channel. And like, if you go to live stream and you click on Tevia's name, it'll take you right to it. So like, I don't even have to link to it. You should be able to easily find that yourself if you're watching this even after the fact. Yeah, I guess we'll leave it there. Maybe I'll check out that video, or that show Tevye was talking about. But I still need to work my way through The Haunting of Hill House so that I can watch The Haunting of Bly Manor, which everyone wants me to see in my personal life. And I'm not doing that because I'm actively working my way through American Horror Story, which I think I said in an earlier stream. And I'm really enjoying American Horror Story, even though I'm so late to that game. So. I got so many things to do for October, I guess, in terms of watching, and I don't like. I don't know. Watching is just usually something that's kind of on in the background while I'm editing. So, I like stuff that I can kind of like. Something like The Haunting of Hill House needs me to actually pay attention to it, so I go through it very slowly, because the amount of time I actually do that is relatively rare. But Blood of Zeus might be good for a background show that I don't necessarily have to care about that much. Not to offend anyone. I don't know anything about it, so I'm just going by the title alone. And you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but you can judge this book by its cover. Because pretty much every Miles book I've read is great. Which is true. That's one of the most remarkably consistent characters in the world of comics out there. Especially given that he's been written by quite a few writers at this point. Not everywhere is good with him. I can think of a couple of team runs that are just awful, but in terms of solo books with Miles, they have a pretty damn good standard at this point. All right. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you next time here on Comic Island. I teased top 10s, and I'm not giving that away, but I will say, next up we do have a certain Joker War story to wrap up from way back, and the aftermath of that to talk about, I believe. So stay tuned for that. And we'll see you next time here on Comic Island.